James here. 10 photos. 10 moments where the real story is darker and weirder than the one you were sold. Let's go. Look at that stage. That white duck on the table. The bubble machine. This wasn't a concert. It was a happening. Pink Floyd rented out the Queen Elizabeth Hall in London and threw what was essentially a psychedelic art installation with music attached. They scattered flower petals from the balcony. The venue banned them afterward for the mess. And Syd Barrett was still in charge, still coherent, still the guy driving the whole insane experiment. 6 months later, he'd be barely able to finish a sentence on stage. This photo is the before. The next one? Completely different kind of chaos. Everyone pictures the Beach Boys as sunshine and harmonies. Look at this photo and tell me that's what you see. By 1972, Brian Wilson had essentially stopped functioning as a band member. He'd spent years in bed, struggling badly, while the others toured without him. And the tension between Mike Love, who wanted commercial pop, and the rest, who wanted to follow Brian's more experimental instincts, was eating the whole operation alive. They were 6 guys who barely agreed on anything anymore. The smiles were long gone. Just business and resentment. A month later, their world cracked open for good, and it never really healed. People always put the Ziggy Stardust era as the moment Bowie invented himself. I think that's wrong. Look at this shot from 1967. The mime makeup, the Pierrot costume, the completely committed stare. He was doing this years before Ziggy existed. The whole persona as art idea didn't arrive with glam rock. It was already fully formed in this kid's head when he was 20 years old and barely anyone was paying attention. Personally, I think this is one of the most underrated photos in rock history. Disagree? Tell me in the comments. There's something almost quiet about this shot. No crowd visible, just the man and the guitar in the dark. By '73, Santana had already been through Woodstock, through massive commercial success, and was deep into his spiritual journey with Sri Chinmoy. Radio stations had no idea what to do with him. You can't program a 10-minute meditation between commercials for Coca-Cola. He knew it. He didn't care. This is a guy completely at peace with being misunderstood. The next photo is the opposite of peace. These 4 guys look like they're having a good time. They were not. Ray and Dave Davies were one of the most combustible brother combinations in rock. Actual fistfights, on-stage screaming. Dave claiming Ray once tried to strangle him. And underneath all of that, the band was getting banned from America for 4 years by the Musicians Union after a disastrous tour in '65. 4 years. When every other British band was conquering the States, the Kinks were locked out entirely. Me and an old buddy used to argue about this, whether the American band actually saved their career by forcing Ray to write differently, or if it just cost them everything. I lean toward it saved them. Where do you stand? While Plant was chasing groupies and Bonham was destroying hotel rooms, John Paul Jones had his wife on the plane. That tells you everything about the man. He was the one who nearly quit the band in '73, quietly, no drama, because he wanted to be home with his family. No one talks about that. The guy holding the whole musical architecture of Led Zeppelin together was the one who almost walked away from it. But while JPJ was quietly trying to hold his marriage and his band together, another guy across the Atlantic was fighting just to get back into a recording studio. Look at this next one. Born to Run made him famous. Darkness on the Edge of Town nearly broke him completely. The legal battle with his former manager froze him out of the studio for over 2 years, right at the peak of his momentum. He couldn't record, couldn't release anything. By the time this tour started, he had to basically rebuild his audience from scratch through sheer force of live performance alone. 3-hour shows, 4-hour shows, night after night. In my opinion, that legal disaster produced the best work of his career because it stripped everything down to pure hunger. You see it in this shot, every single inch of it. The next photo? That same raw energy, but 30 years earlier and even more dangerous. Four guys who genuinely could not stand each other for long stretches, held together by the fact that they were absolutely terrifying as a unit. Their live shows didn't sound like music. They sounded like a building coming down, with Keith Moon as the demolition crew. Keith Moon, quiet in this shot, which is almost unsettling if you know anything about Keith Moon. Pete Townsend already had the intellectual framework for Tommy forming in his head. And John Entwistle, standing there looking like a banker, was probably the most technically gifted musician in the room. Speaking of people who were quietly running everything. The bat wings, the white face, the headband. Most people frame Peter Gabriel's departure from Genesis in 1975 as a tragedy, the band losing its creative heart. I'll die on that hill going the other direction. Leaving was the best thing that ever happened to him. Genesis actually got bigger after he left, and Gabriel went on to make records that were genuinely strange and genuinely important in ways the band never could have supported. Sometimes the divorce is the breakthrough. And speaking of bands that almost didn't make it past the first photo shoot, nobody expected this. A bunch of guys from Seattle, formed from the wreckage of another band, shooting a debut album cover in a warehouse. 10 took almost a year to build any momentum. It wasn't an overnight explosion. And Eddie Vedder had auditioned for the band by recording demos over a backing tape and mailing them from San Diego. He'd never even met them in person. Then this photo happens. Then everything changes. And that's exactly the kind of story I keep going back to the vault for. 10 photos. 10 moments where the version of events most people carry around is either incomplete or just flat wrong. That's what keeps me coming back to these archives. The real story is always messier than the myth. So tell me, which one of these bands do you think history has gotten the most wrong?